Okay, so we are back into our scene and we have already covered the tilt and the pan shots, and we had pass for each of those. Now, what I'm going to do is just to clear things out, I'm going to delete both of those paths just to clean up my space here because I'm not going to be using those paths anymore. And it sets me up for this add new path. Now, the add new path function is what we're going to cover now is when you're filming with a traditional camera or a tangible or a tactile camera, one of the functions is a dolly shot. And what a dolly shot does is there are dollies. A dolly is actually the tool that moves through a scene. So it's normally a set of tracks and the camera is mounted on those, and it allows you to push the camera through a scene smoothly to accomplish a tracking shot or a dolly shot. And so that's what we're going to work on here is a dolly shot. And so I am going to I'm sitting here making my mind up about what kind of a shot I want to have. Let's start with just a dolly shot where we are going to um, come straight into, we'll go from this location and we will go right down to this flame. And so we, just like any other shot, we need to set up our different tools. We need our direction point. And in this case, we're not going to change direction. So we're only going to put that in one location. And that is going to be going straight down towards that that flame texture that's in there, that flame stroke. I'm going to add a speed point in here. And again, I'm adding these at the very beginning of my camera path. Actually, I put them a little before and then I move them there. Let's see what that gives us for speed. That's not too bad. So I'm going to move this all the way back here. And you can see what that gives us. And then we could add a zoom point, though it is not necessary. In this, it is essentially doing a zoom in this. But let's go ahead and add it just for kicks and grins. Let's establish that at a 38.3. And I'm going to move that back. Take a look and see what we get. Starting point. And set this up so that you can see the whole thing, what it looks like from the camera's view and what it looks through the viewfinder. So that is a basic dolly shot. Now, another kind of shot that you can have, it's what's called a tracking shot. And a tracking shot, and I'm going to use the same exact path. I'm just going to change the camera. A tracking shot is normally used to follow alongside a character or whatever in a shot. So if we change the direction of that, then what you see, it's still taking the same path, but it's doing it in a way that it's not going into or away from the camera or the camera's perspective, but it's coming in beside. So I'm going to move this all the way to 140 to 140, and that is, when I say this, that is the zoom, and you can see a little bit different. So what that does is it comes along and it's filming parallel to the camera itself to capture the scene in what would be called tracking. So if you had somebody walking down a street and you had a dolly going along beside them, that would be a tracking shot. It would be following that character through the scene. And now there's a couple of other options that we can do here. So the previous dolly shot that I had it moving straight in. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move my camera. Actually, let me stop that. I'm going to try and grab this camera. That's why I normally work on them, the different tools, not on an anchor point because they're easier to grab if you do. So I'm going to move that off. And I'm going to rotate that so that instead of going into that flame like we did in the original dolly shot, we're going to back into it. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to change my last direction because otherwise we'll never get to the flame. So I'm just going to change this last point so that it is beyond the flame. So coming back out, getting our tools. And that's another thing about doing virtual cinematography is you are actually going into the tools that the scene that you're working on in a way that you couldn't do with a traditional camera, because in this case I'm going right into the flower. So if we bring that one back to the beginning, watch and see where it goes. Now, one of the things that I like to do with this kind of shot is, actually, let me bring it out to the side here. I'm going to establish another camera path, but first, before I establish that camera path, no, I'll establish the camera path first. So I'm going to select a new path. I'm going to create a new path. I'm going to create an anchor point and a second anchor point. And what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to set this up as a pretty much a straightforward path. So I'm going to start with a direction point. And what I'm going to do is along that camera path, I'm actually going to add a stroke that what I'm demonstrating is the ability to go into a stroke. So certain brushes give you the ability to do some really cool stuff here. Some of the three-dimensional brushes allow for some really cool stuff. I'm going to grab the pedal brush. And so what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to put this onto my smallest setting, and I've got too many things in my way. They're starting to interfere. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a blue pedal, and I'm going to go down that line. And let's see what that looks like. So we bring in our tool. I'm going to start with just the default speed and zoom, but let's take a look at what this is going to allow us to do. It's going to allow us to come into that stroke. Now, the inverse is also possible. If we had this going the other direction, we would be able to come out of that stroke. And what it does is it allows for some really cool effects because you're able to go through these strokes instead of being tied to going in or out of them or going around them. You're actually able to go into them or through them, and it allows you to do some really cool features. Now, so what I'm going to do here, I am going to to take that stroke out, and I'm going to turn on my straight edge. And to go directly down that path, what I'll do is I'll start there, and I will go to where the camera is. Actually, I'll stay a little bit out from the camera, so that this is what you end up with. So it's just, this is one of those techniques that I use when I am doing this. So let's go into some advanced stuff here. Um, let's say that I want to have this camera spin as it's going through that. There's different ways that we can do that. So let's start with a direction tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of directions here. Now, I'll just put the cameras here first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate them so that what it creates is a spinning effect. As it's following along that. Let's see what that looks like. And now let's take that just a little bit further and let's add a couple anchor points in here. I'm going to add an anchor point between all of the camera points. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to change the path so that as it rotates, it's going to also, I need to turn that off. It's also going to spin. So what I'm doing is I'm using these controls to set up that spin. And let's see what we end up with. All right, take it beginning. Now, as I adjust these, I can adjust those so that it stays inside of that. To get a twirling motion from within that individual stroke. So you can see how you can use this to play. Now, that's going forward. If I set it up the other way so that my stroke was the other direction, all right, so let me try a different stroke. Let me grab that stroke And I'll move that one out of the way. Actually, I'll leave it a little bit connected. And let me grab a different brush. Oh, let's do a comet. I don't know exactly what we're going to end up with here, but I'm going to switch that to a sort of a red. And then I'm going to paint. Oops. And let's move that brush out of the way. Or even set it back here. And you'll notice that when it's selected, it's not visible. And each brush is going to give us a little bit different kind of perspective on what we got here. So so anyway, that's just playing with the tools. Uh, the tools that you have available within the camera pass are to add anchor points, to take them apart, add direction points, speed points, and zoom points, and then combined with your strokes, you're able to create some really interesting effects. So I'm going to cut this video off at that point, and we'll see you in the next video. Save my work. You know what I haven't played with is zoom point. So within the same path, I'm going to change the zoom level. So that zoomed all the way in. This is zoomed all the way out. This is somewhere in between. Now, one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these. I'm going to flop them around so that we're going into them instead of out of them. something to play with. Every stroke's going to be different. They're going to appear different, and that's what you just got to spend time doing, is to see what are the possibilities and how are you going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. That's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you later. Bye bye.